Hey, Anthony. It's really nice to be here with you today for this podcast episode.
Yeah, it's great to be here. Thank you very much for inviting me.
Oh, pleasure. So today what we're talking about is the importance of engaging the entire organization in customer experience to drive breakthrough impact. And we will be exploring how to develop a strategy that unleashes CX insights across the organization, and also we'll be talking about strengthening strategies through aligned execution. But before that, can you tell us a bit about you?
Yeah, so Anthony Palmer, I set up Ignition Strategy with my business partner about 18 months ago. And having spent 30 years in the corporate world, we recognise that there is really an opportunity to accelerate strategy through unlocking the power of insight and capability that sits within organisations itself. So we run programmes to work on defining strategy, but also implementing strategy, so that there is an acceleration of that into the organisation that embeds and encapsulates the culture of that organisation, leveraging the knowledge that's already there.
I'm Alex Blondin. I'm an independent consultant, and what I do is I work with the C-suite team and the rest of their teams as well to help them gather high-quality insights and advise on how to use those to make better strategic decisions. So fundamentally what I do is I help them actually talk to their customers, get that voice of the customer, so that when they're making decisions, they really know that they're doing it based on clear customer insights. But I take it a bit further than that. I also help them understand the customer's perspective, the employee's perspective, and even other stakeholders' perspective.
Right.
And I think that's one of the things where we wanted to sort of do this together because of the way that I focus more on the research side and the understanding the customers, the customer experience from different aspects. But actually, you do some of that as well. But then you also take it further, and then you work on, I think, it's more of the execution, isn't it?
Yeah, and I think that's the important thing is, having those insights gives a huge opportunity for organisations to unlock power and really accelerate how they implement the actions from it. And having a strong implementation plan is how you do that, and driving that across the organisation. Because CX Insights is not just one function, it happens across the whole organisation. So if you unlock that power of the organisation, the power of the research can be really, really interesting.
Yeah, no, absolutely. But I suppose maybe we should start by defining what customer experience is from our perspective. And the way I'd like to put it first, and maybe if you want to sort of give me your perspective, is that I think the obvious one is customer experience is the sum of every interaction a customer has with the business before, during, and after purchase, if you like. But more than that, CX is how a business aligns its operations, products, services, and culture to meet and even exceed the customer expectations. I don't know if you have a different perspective.
I think we're very, very aligned. But what I would say is that power of that internal organisation of really making sure that everybody there is aligned to that experience. And the way that operates through an organisation is different by function, but the insights each function has can help build that experience to a level which is far superior than just one function owning it. So yeah, I think your definition is spot on, but the engagement of the organisation across the board is what's going to make that difference in making CX come to life and live in an organisation.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's the whole thing about CX, as we think about it as just being a customer function. So it's all about the customer team or the customer facing team that have to just make sure that, I suppose, in a sense, that when customers are unhappy, we make sure they become happier or we solve their problems, etc. But actually, from my perspective, customer experience is understanding how every single part of the business actually has an impact on the actual end customer's experience. And it's not just that sort of customer facing side, the front end, if you want to use a digital analogy. It's actually everything that's happening before that and in between. It could be from the employee's perspective, it could be from other stakeholders' perspective, it could be from the C-suite teams as well. Like everyone's doing something or making something happen or not making something happen that has a direct impact on that customer experience. And it's really, really important to ensure that all of these things are, I think, aligned, that they all work, because even if one thing is out of kilter, it will have an impact. And if you don't know what that is, you don't know how to solve the problem.
Yeah, and I think really understanding from a customer perspective what their priorities of importance are, because often what can happen is an organisation thinks they understand the customer, but in reality, the true value that an organization attaches to certain things can be misaligned, and that misalignment can cause real issues in that customer journey, because if you've got that misalignment, you're not creating the value you think you're creating for the end user.
Yeah, absolutely.
Great. So perhaps it would be really interesting to hear a couple of examples, Alex, where you've seen the power of customer insight and customer experience driving cross-organizational impact.
Yeah, no, sure. So I had a bit of a think about this, and I wanted to find some examples that everyone knew. So I've gone for, let's start with one. I started with Salesforce, which I think we all know. It's sort of rather quite a large organization. And this is going back some time. It's back from the mid-2010s. But I think that's actually quite important to look at how companies have been doing this for a very long time. This is not a new thing. It's really important. And large organizations, well, obviously have probably the means to do it, but obviously then they also have rather larger scale. So it is a challenge. But what they realized is that they had some struggles with usability and implementation and getting long-term value for their customers. So they decided to go through what I call high-quality customer research. So the way I differentiate customer research, there's obviously the quant and the qual. And so I tend to say that high quality tends to sort of lean on the qual side of things. But I think also even the quant side, if you mix the quant and the qual together, that's where you start having that really high quality insight where you understand, yes, of course, the numbers, but you also get to understand the nuance and the context by actually speaking to people. And that's the magic, sort of the magic ingredients. So what they worked on was the voice of the customer, creating voice of customer programs. They ran structured customer interviews, they did surveys, usability tests, and they really wanted to understand the pain points in adoption and day-to-day usage. They also worked on doing customer success deep dives, and that was the sales and customer success teams gathered qualitative insights on why customers weren't seeing return on investment. And also the key thing for me is that they made sure that there was cross-functional data sharing. So they really sort of broke through those silos that a lot of organizations have where they don't actually share those insights. And instead of keeping feedback siloed, Salesforce created a central insights hub, and the research was used by the product, marketing, and sales teams to drive decisions, which is, for me, is exactly what you're supposed to do. You don't just gather insights, keep them to yourself, and then hope that everything's going to fall into place. And what I really like about that is that the impact was that the product team redesigned Salesforce interface. They launched Salesforce Lightning, which is a cleaner, more intuitive UI, and that improved usability. So that's sort of the basics, I suppose. But the marketing team then, another department, shifted focus to customer education. So they launched something called Trailhead. It's an interactive learning platform based on feedback that customers wanted, hands-on, self-paced learning. Again, understanding how that worked. And from a sales and customer success perspective, the insights showed that customer needed more consultative guidance post-sale. So this led to Salesforce Customer Success Services, which embedded long-term adoption support into contracts. So really they started understanding, listening to their customers and actually acting upon it rather than just trying to guess internally what was happening. So, yeah.
Yeah, I've got a couple of observations on that. And I think it's really interesting, the power of what that customer experience insight did for the organization. But I think the most important thing is actions were taken from it. And I'm sure from the work that they did, there were tens of opportunities, but they seem to have really powerfully prioritized what was important and what was going to make a difference to that customer experience. And then they focused on it and delivered not just a small change, but they've really focused to completely change the customer experience going through it. And I think that there's probably a couple of areas there. The first one is prioritization, which is really difficult for an organization. Every organization is operating at 100% capacity. And to start laddering new things on is really difficult. There isn't the resource to do it necessarily. But making those choices and deciding what not to do within an organization to fit in what's important are the discussions which are the most powerful. And the do not do's in an organization often are more useful than the what are we going to do, because it's an easy yes, saying we're going to do this. It's a very difficult no, saying we're going to stop doing this or we're going to deprioritize this. So to me, I think when you hear what Salesforce were doing, they managed to get that prioritization right. They resourced it and they had clear outcomes from the research. It didn't just sit on a shelf, but it fundamentally changed the model of how they were going to market. And everybody knows it's the success of Salesforce.
What I talk about when I'm saying to a customer, do your research is also what are we going to focus on? And it doesn't matter what the size of the organization is. Either you could be a Salesforce or you could be even a very lean startup. Everyone's got these challenges of resourcing and saying, well, actually, what we need to do is we just need to get something done. So let's skip all that stuff. Obviously, you shouldn't do that. You really, really need to understand your customers. You need to understand your employees and your stakeholders and understand how they as an ecosystem function and therefore shape your customer experience as an organization. But more importantly, you need to know what to focus on. You can't do everything in one go. And I think that's exactly what you're pointing out here, is that they did specific programs. They looked at types of customers. They didn't speak to necessarily everyone, but they looked at what was achievable, who were obviously the most high impact targets, if you like, and made things work for them. Now, I don't know more of the detail, but I presume that not all of this happened necessarily in one go. Maybe they started with one piece and then went, okay, now we understand better. Now we can do the next phase of research because it's informed. Yes. Or even often what I found is that if you do, let's say, customer interviews first, it gives you that context, the stories and the nuance. And then you can use that to do your quantitative research where you can go and ask multiple questions in a survey. But again, you've built a survey that is focused, exactly. Understands what is it we're trying to get out of it. It's not for everything, it's for certain things. But then the important part is that then you can actually give that to all the different departments and they can work together to solve the problems, because the problem probably isn't just with one department, is it?
Exactly. And the power is in the briefing. And one of the metaphors we use is compass synchronization, really making sure right from the beginning of a project, the outcomes are clear. And if you travel from London to Singapore and you're 5 degrees out, you end up in Indonesia. And Indonesia is not Singapore. But if every department and every team member has a different objective by 5 degrees, you never end up at the end destination that you want to get to. So that alignment to brief right at the beginning and the prioritization of what is important is an absolutely critical piece of any project plan to deliver the outcomes that are then implementable and can actually get actioned.
Yeah, absolutely. Funny enough, it echoes an approach that I have, which is I call it the experience alignment research framework. And the idea here, again, is looking at if you've got your business goals and you've got your customer needs, they need to be aligned. But for them to be aligned, you need to have the rest of the business or the departments of the business to be all aligned to work seamlessly, if you like. And if one is overperforming, one is underperforming, well, there's misalignment, and therefore it is going to have an impact. So again, the idea of focus is also understanding, looking at every department, or maybe that you want to only look at a few, but understanding the role that each one has to play, doing your research. Again, that's why I was saying that talking to employees is really important, because they will have some insights as well. They will have either interacted directly with customers or indirectly, and they can start telling you where they see that there are misalignments or problems within the organization that are causing those problems. Yes. And then you can start looking at all of them and saying, okay, I see that we need to focus on this aspect, we need to fix that, and this one is doing absolutely great, so we can leave it. But without that knowledge, I think you're just doing guesswork. And that how on earth are you supposed to be able to fix the problems or the challenges or improve your customer experience if you don't even know where the problems are, I suppose. Yeah,
no, completely agree. And perhaps you have another example as well of where customer experience has really impacted the organization.
So another one in a similar vein, this was IBM. Again, we all know IBM. Roughly, actually, funnily enough, about the sort of mid-2010s as well. They were struggling to transition from a hardware company to a cloud and AI-driven enterprise service provider. And they wanted to understand what enterprise customers actually wanted from AI and cloud solutions, rather than what IBM assumed that they wanted. And again, that's a big challenge that we have as organizations. We make a lot of assumptions. I think that we think we know what's wrong because we're running the business and we're making the decisions, but actually that's not entirely true. So you really have to sort of go and talk to customers. And IBM being, again, one of these really large organizations, it's even more critical to be able to go and talk to the customers and get that voice. So they actually started with talking to their executive level clients, or the clients on the executive level side, and doing interviews with them. So they conducted in-depth qualitative interviews to understand their real pain points in cloud adoption and AI integration. Now, I presume that back in that day as well, AI wasn't as well known. So, goodness knows, where do you start? What's it for, etc. So they probably needed to really understand what the challenges were. So having those conversations probably And then IBM could start seeing, where the gaps were and how they could really help their customers. They also, I think, very intelligently did industry-specific voice of the customer program. So instead of treating all clients the same, they actually segmented the research by industry. So it was finance, healthcare, and manufacturing to get those contextual insights. And again, I think that's really important. You can't just lump people in together. There's so much nuance. We're all, human beings. We all think differently. So they were able to look at that. And then, as discussed with Salesforce, there was the cross-department collaboration that really made a difference, where they were not just the insights were not just used by sales. They were shared across R&D, the product team, and the consulting divisions to build solutions tailored to real-world business challenges. So again, they were able to remove all those assumptions. I'm going to presume that, again, AI is not something where they just knew exactly where to go, but they probably had strong ideas. And just by talking to those customers and understanding what their needs, their wants and pain points were, they were able to absolutely tailor that. And so that meant that the product and R&D teams were able to develop Watson AI for industry-specific use cases. So they had Watson Health for healthcare, Watson Supply Chain for logistics, and that was all based directly on customer insights. The sales and consultant teams moved away from generic sales pitches and focused on consultative selling, which positioned IBM as a strategic partner rather than just a technology vendor. And in customer success and operations, they created a hybrid cloud solutions. Instead of pushing just IBM only, they realized that what they could do was allow enterprise customers to integrate IBM AI with Amazon Web Services, Microsoft Azure, and other cloud services. So they really were able to get to what the customers actually needed. And for me, it comes back to this idea they were able to align their business objectives, which they obviously were very clear about, but they suddenly had an absolute clarity on what their customer needs were, and that's where they were able to align that together.
Yeah, and I think the power of that cross-organizational insight is really interesting as well, because it's interesting, and I'm going to from a software AI perspective to a FMCG perspective, which is most of my background. And if you line up and you think you're selling into retailers, the insights and perspective from different members of the team around the organization can be very, very insightful. So, be that regulatory and quality, be that R&D, be that the supply chain, they've got touch points with the retailers with a very, very different perspective, but they're also getting insight from that retailer, which isn't the typical sales to sales, buyer to sales channel. And joining all of those up means you're extracting all the knowledge of the power of the organization to strengthen those insights that are coming into the organization. Because there's often a lot of knowledge base across the organization, which is just hidden in a laptop or hidden in the head. And so having that cross-functional collaboration right from the beginning of, what are we trying to achieve and how are we going to build that? Because a relationship with a business isn't just a salesman. It is across the organization. It's the support you put into that organization. And leveraging that insight could be really, really helpful and powerful.
Yeah, it reminds me of having worked in the financial services sectors and also in healthcare, where compliance and risk management were obviously paramount. Mm-hmm. And it's incredible how often, and it's not just about sort of research projects, I'm not even just talking about those, but how often, because of the siloed nature of how projects were delivered, that they left it until the last minute for compliance to come in. And they were all very surprised when suddenly compliance went, absolutely not, this is not acceptable because of this, this, and this, and this. And if only they'd actually involved them from the start, they could have asked them, where are going to be the challenges, where are going to be the blocking points, where can we go, where can we not go? Mm-hmm. All of that information, that internal insight could have been really useful for then going and doing the research, again, the focus, understanding what to talk about, what not to talk about with clients. And then also from a strategic perspective, when they decided what to do, they would have had the perspectives of all the departments within the organization and would have avoided these massive headaches where suddenly they'd have to go, actually we have to sort of start from scratch again. Yep. When you're weeks away from delivery.
And which is ridiculous because the knowledge was there. The knowledge was in the organization. It was just not extracted. And knowing when to engage, and often it's very early on, and people feel very engaged when they're asked. They're sitting there doing the compliance, and the fact that somebody's actually asking them what is the impact is highly motivating for employees, and it's highly beneficial just from a morale point of view, but from a business effectiveness, it's really strong.
Yeah, I agree. I think I've often described it as being a bit of a cheat sheet. You've got all the answers there.
Yes.
Why are you not just going out and asking your team? They're right there. You know, you can contact them, you can ask them questions. And I really like what you pointed out, that from a cultural perspective, people really appreciate that you care about what they have to say and think. They're the ones, you know, who are running your business. You know, they're part of that team, and they know things. They may not feel that they can talk about them all the time, but actually with these sorts of projects, you're actually signaling that you actually think that what they have to say is really important and valuable. And so they're more likely to share even more valuable insights with you that can, again, shape so many things within the organization.
And the beauty of this is you're already paying for these resources. They have that knowledge. It's not an additional cost. It is an instant return on investment because they have the knowledge and it's sitting there. So I think the power of customer insight is across the board, and being siloed doesn't deliver the strength of insight that you can get. Going in, because once you get the insight across the organization, it then leads to even more powerful questioning of the customer to really get in depth, because you've got that understanding, you've got that benchmark understanding to get in and get even deeper.
And also I think that what happens there is that if you start signaling that it's okay to talk to the other teams and ask them questions, and, you know, what do you know, that knowledge sharing again is quite critical to be able to sort of react faster as well. Because it's one thing to, let's say, do a structured voice of the customer research program. It's great, really useful, very important. But there has to come a point where I believe that the understanding your audiences, to give it that wider term, needs to become more embedded within the organization, and it becomes more of a natural thing. So yes, you still need structure and you need to plan things ahead. But I think that being able to sort of just pick up the phone and talk to your colleague and say, look, you know, we're going through this. I'm seeing these signals that there may be a problem or there might be an opportunity. On your side, how is it impacting you? And they can say, well, actually, yeah, it's really interesting because it's impacting us in this other way. And then suddenly the two together can say, we can see the cross benefits or the advantages. We can actually work on something together there.
And I think it's interesting because customer experience doesn't need to be transformational. It can be a process of marginal gain, of finding those 1% everywhere and adding them up and making a real significant difference. It doesn't need to be that transformational program every time. And what I like about what you say is that it embeds itself into the culture, into the organization as a modus operandi of this is how we work. This is what we expect of our leaders, of our staff, to be always thinking about that experience and almost always thinking, how can we improve it? How do we do it? But embedding that into the culture takes time, and getting that external perspective first, building that in, building on the knowledge of the organization, and then engaging it so that there is a program behind it that is ongoing, continuous, and always looking for those small tweaks, because you add those small tweaks together, it can make a very big difference.
From your perspective, how do you think, because, okay, I'll wind back a bit. What I found is that often organizations don't want to do that research part because I think, frankly, it's a bit scary. Like, you've actually got to sort of, be open and get sometimes quite strong criticism and feedback that might sort of hurt a little bit. But also they see it as a lot of effort. It takes time. You know, it's much easier to just get those survey results, etc. But how have you found within sort of your projects, or even over your career, how have organizations responded to that idea of suddenly becoming, we all say customer-centric, but I think in practice what it means is being more customer-centric is just talking to your customers, being more open to listening, etc. How have you seen that evolve or change over time?
Well, I think technology has really helped play a big role in it, because you can get feedback much, much quicker, and that enables actions to be taken very quickly as well. I think the second thing is organisations should never be frightened of feedback, because it will catch up with them. And you might not want to hear it, but if you don't hear it, you will hear it and it will be too late. So you're better being on the front foot of customer experience to be able to respond to the feedback and be seen as being proactive by your customer. You know, if you're asking your customer for feedback about it and it's not good, you can change, and you've got a chance to do that. If you're hearing when they've delisted you or stopped buying you, it's too late, and you know the horse is bolted by then. So I think organizations need to step in and really recognize that this is an opportunity, and it's an opportunity for business growth and acceleration. And it's not a risk. The risk of hearing bad news is actually an opportunity, because the risk is losing business in the long term. And by not doing this sort of work, you're never going to know if that's coming.
Yeah.
So I think, in my experience, first of all, being very, very proactive on customer experience and really wanting it and really making sure the organisation is engaged in it is really important. But I do think the second area is the execution, the implementation out of it, because it's fine having all these insights, but if you don't do anything with them, then nothing will change. And I can think to a number of instances in my career where, in hindsight, if you'd have actually actioned more of what you were hearing and been slightly more radical on your thinking of execution afterwards, you could probably have got a better result from where we ended up. And so, I think having a program of implementation, of execution, of those insights that involves the whole organization is really, really important, because otherwise what can often happen is it's almost a tick the box exercise, and you end up with a beautiful report, but nothing happens from it. And if nothing happens, there's no point doing it. And so to me, that's the difference between a really strong customer experience program versus one that is being done but doesn't really lead to tangible results.
Yeah, I feel that sometimes understanding your customers is seen as a bit of, well, actually you said it, it's a tick box exercise. We just have to do it. There are some easy tools out there to go and capture something. And then once we've said, well, our KPIs are whatever, X, Y, and Z, great, we've done the job. But the challenge is that if you just do that, and as you say, you put it on the shelf, what a waste of time and money and effort. And I think also actually probably what a waste of morale boosting, as we said, like getting the team involved and really understanding the customers, really understand why they're doing such things. I think that really helps as well. Once you know what your customers' needs, wants, and pain points are, suddenly you can actually respond and do things. We all have our own opinions and way of thinking strategically on behalf of our business. So it's really, really important to have something that happens. It's really important, I think, to say, okay, we do the research, that's critical, and we have to take it seriously. It's not just a tick the box exercise. And I won't go into all the detail of why I think it's important. I have spoken about this previously. But one of the reasons why I was really excited about us having this conversation, so I wanted to ask you is, because the way I see it is that you come after me in a sense in one of these projects. It is, I will come and I will collect or help the C-suite collect insights that can help them make these better strategic decisions. Great. But what if they don't do anything with it? So then that's something that it's my pet hate is nothing happens. I feel like it's a bit of a failure. Why do we do all this work if it's never going to be used and it's put on the shelf? So my question to you is, what are the key steps to ensure CX is successfully embedded across the organization?
Yeah, well, first of all, it's credit to you, Alex. It's the strength of the insights that the organisation really thinks this is something that we can do, and this is something that we can take and actually build on. But from there, I think it's the making sure there is a strong structured program of implementation, and through that means action, and that means making sure that there is a process to prioritise what are the major outcomes. We've already talked about prioritisation. From the insights that you will leave, there'll be many areas of opportunity, but there will be always an 80-20 rule that allows you to pick the top 2 or 3 that make 80% of the impact. And so aligning that with leadership is really important. And this is a top-down, bottom-up process where you've got the whole organization engaged. Leadership need to be aligned to those priorities to say, yes, we agree that this is worth allocating resource to and executing. But from there, having a really strong plan of making sure that there is an action steps for the next 30, 60, 90 days that is very clear. If you don't have a 30-day plan, you don't have a strategy, you don't have a project. If you can't deliver the first 30 days, nothing will happen beyond it. So through that program, you really work cross-function with the teams to say, what does this mean for the organization? What does good look like? We know where we are now. Where do we want to be in 2 years' time? What is the vision for this work stream of where it's going to get us to in terms of that customer experience? And that is all driven on the back of your insight that you deliver, where we'd work hand in hand to say, yes, we know where we are now, but the customer actually wants this. And then how are we going to get there? And then from there, you then ask, right, okay, then what is it going to take? You know, what are the actions that are really going to deliver this? And then finally, the individual specifics behind that. Who is going to do it? What timescale? And making sure that there is accountability going through that. But in this process as well is the leadership alignment and engagement through that process to track it, to monitor it. Through the whole process, it's got to be iterative. We will get learnings through that process of things that are working, things that are landing, things that are not. And it gives you the chance to readjust, reallocate resource. So it becomes an ongoing program of optimization and delivery. But having a really rigid program and having that built in so that there is a planned implementation workshop after the results delivery. So not on the same day, because people need time to process. They need to see the information. But, you know, a week or so after, getting everybody back. And the advantage of that then is if you imagine that you've got your sales leader, you've got your R&D leader, you've got your regulatory leader, all talking back into the customer. And they're saying, oh, we've seen the results and we're working on it now. We've got an implementation workshop. It gets back to the customer as well, that they're acting on it. It's become important. It's become prioritized. And that starts changing the philosophy of the organization, not just from inside the company, but also from the customer perspective, because they begin to hear little snippets of it and they begin to see what are those quick wins? What are the opportunities to show that the organization has already listened, to show impact within 30, 60 days? There will be some quick wins there, which will ladder up to a bigger theme. But getting on those and getting them done starts building that momentum, building the size of the snowball that starts rolling down the hill and getting bigger and bigger.
It's interesting because 30 to 60 days doesn't feel that long when you're thinking about strategy. I mean, I know it's really great to, you look at where you are in 2 years, as you said, and you work your way back. But from a leader's perspective or the leadership team's perspective, what sort of things, I don't know, maybe practical things, what does it look like in terms of getting a plan together? Because only over 30 days, how much change can happen? I suppose thanks to knowing what your customers need, etc. How do we transition from, we've got a bunch of information and insights to we have a 30-day plan? What does that look like from the leadership's perspective?
Well, the beauty for the process is it is strategic because you start with where do we want to get to? And that is the vision. That is the vision that the team has. And that is effectively the strategy. And that is saying we know that we have prioritized, and strategy is the choiceful allocation of resource. It's the choices that you make to allocate resource in your organization. So by going through that prioritization process, landing on a theme and then aligning that with leadership, that is the vision of where you're trying to get to. So that is what is engaging the leadership. That is what they're buying into in terms of the end result. But having that 30-day plan starts the project moving forward. And a 30-day plan is very short. And one of the biggest issues when I run this process very often is teams put a huge amount of things in 30 days. And you spend a lot of time telling them, does that really need to happen in 30 days for this project to move forward? Because often what you find is only a couple of things that need to happen, which if they don't happen, will then not allow the 60-day things to happen. So often what you find is you end up trying to move things out of 30 days because the team's put so much in it and focusing on the really core things that are needed to move that project to the next stage. And that might be that there might be some follow-up questions that we need from the customer just to absolutely be sure that we nailed on the head one of the insights. It might be that there is board alignment needed beyond just the management team. It might be that I'm trying to think of another example, but there are some things that will allow engagement in that project with the organization to move forward. once you get into the 60, 90 day, you start to think in actual fact, there are some things that we can implement here where we can start testing and learning. And that might be small scale. It might be one account into, if we're doing multiple customer feedback, it might be one account to trial it. But there are opportunities there to try things and to prove out hypotheses, which will have come through the implementation workshop. And then as you start building, obviously, what you get to then after 90 days is you're never going to have delivered the 2, because that should be 2 years out. That should be the vision of where you want to get to. But what you've hopefully done is you started aligning the teams that there's really clear direction. And once you get to about 60 days, you start thinking, right, okay, now to 120 days, where do we need to be? What are the next steps? And it starts rolling. But as I say, 30 days, it's tactical. But strategy needs tactics. And if you don't have that, it will always become a vision that is never realized.
What do you think would happen if you were to try to do everything you've just talked about without clear understanding of what your customers need, want, or what their pain points are?
Well, I think the danger is you end up with a lot of hypotheses that aren't true, and there is a real risk that you're going to go off and start answering solutions that you think are important for the company, but aren't important for the customer. And so not having that insight could waste resource. It could cause actually issues internally, because by not having the right insight could lead you down a path which is completely wrong. And if you're trying to embed customer experience into your organization, it's very, very difficult to do without actually asking the customer about their experience. So I think if an organization is serious, and I do go back to the beginning, which is this is all organizations. If it is a startup, if it is a mid-sized organization or a large organization, customer experience should be at the heart of what they're thinking, because that is the route to growth. That is the route to uncovering opportunity and becoming best in class in terms of service. So, but if you really are true to that, you have to get the truth and hear it as it is from your customer. And if you're not prepared to do that, you're probably not serious enough about actually putting in place the program.
I think you're absolutely right, because often I think the word CX is used left, right, and centre. It's one of those buzzwords like UX, so you've got UX, CX, etc. We need to be customer centric, but if you don't have the tools to actually do something, saying that you want to be more customer centric is great. It's a nice ambition and a nice desire, but if you don't have the tools to actually do it properly, as you say, it will never happen. And if you don't actually know what your customers think, if you don't know what your employees think or what they know, or even what other stakeholders know about you and what you're doing and what the impact it has on the current customer experience, there is no way that you can deliver something structured or unstructured that's actually going to have any chance of success, bar, basically just being lucky and just getting it right just because you're lucky. I don't think that's a great strategic decision-making of, hey, shall we invest a lot of money and hope that this is going to work? I don't think that's the right option or the right way forward.
Yeah, and it's interesting from a leadership of CX, Alex. Where do you see that in the organisation? Who champions CX in an organisation?
Ideally, everyone. But I think that it should be something that is, if you were to talk about the pillars of your organisation, I think that understanding your customers. So actually, rather than just saying CX, because customer experience, is, I think it permeates everything. Right? Without our customers, we're not selling anything, so we're not getting the revenue we need to build our business and grow it. Fine. But it's actually, I think that one of the pillars of any organization from a strategic perspective should be always knowing culturally that we are going to go out there and talk to our customers and hear the good and the bad and the ugly so that we can make better strategic decisions. But then, to answer your question directly, who should be in charge of that? I think that every single business department should have a CX champion within it. Mm-hmm. And then potentially these could be people who also all get together and talk about all the different CX challenges, opportunities they have across their departments, so that again it supports the breaking down of silos, or in fact, you could argue that there would be no more silos if they were all getting together and there was an actual person who was named and whose main responsibility was to make sure that whatever their department does has a positive impact on the customer experience, and they're getting together and sharing all of this and their learnings, then there would be no blind spots at all. You would always know where the challenges are, and you'd always be able to say, as I pointed out, that you might be seeing something at the front end that's going wrong, but if you've got no idea where it comes from, because it's not just at the front end that there's a problem, and if you don't know where it is in the, let's call it the back end, then you'll never be able to fix it. Whereas if all of these CX champions are communicating, talking, ideating around it, then you can say, oh, I actually realized that there was some small thing that we're doing, with one of our systems or processes that is making our teams work much harder or not communicating the information we need, etc. And that's actually really having that sort of negative impact on our customers. That sort of communication would be the best way, the best way to basically always stay informed and break down the silos and avoid blind spots. So to just conclude, it should be one person per department should actually be in charge of that.
Yeah, and I agree. It should be everybody. But I think it's, even at a management team level, every function should have a view on it, because customer experience, it's, if you think of HR recruiting, one of the areas should be, are these people customer focused? And that's not just in a sales team, that's in, an R&D team, in a supply chain team, really making sure that customer experience is at the heart of everything that business does. And when it gets to finance, getting the opportunity to look at the financials, how does this represent itself from a customer perspective? Does it work for them? Does it work for us? It's all the way through. If you embed CX into the organization, it can make a major, major difference.
Well, I would say especially is be wary of just saying this is the marketing team's problem. Terrible, even worse to say problem, but it's so often I think it's just being given to one department because we're just making, again, an assumption that this is it's customer experience and marketing, that's where we talk to our customers the most, but that completely ignores so many other aspects of the customer journeys, the customer experience.
Yes.
So I would absolutely advise never to just say this is a marketing thing or it's a sales thing. It has to be an organizational thing that starts at the very top. If the C-suite or the CEO is not thinking about how do we better understand our customers, and I will not make any strategic decisions without clear customer understanding, then I think that should be a massive red flag.
Yeah. And I do think it's interesting because the world is moving so quickly now that customer assumptions are changing rapidly. So what a customer needed 3 or 4 years ago isn't necessarily what they want today. And I do think the continuity of insight is really important as well, because I don't think you can live for 3 or 4 years without having some insight. And this is where it comes back to always on, always looking, with some structured programs underneath. But I think the world is changing and technology is moving so quickly that this means that what the customer expectations are and the competitor set, and having a view on what competitors are doing is really important as well within the mix, because something can be disrupted within weeks or months now, which might have taken years to have happened before. So again, it comes back to risk. You cannot afford not to have this at the centre of your strategies. Okay,
well, I think probably reaching the end of the podcast now. I think might be time to wrap up, because obviously we could probably talk about this for quite a bit, but I think we should move on probably to sort of our top tips?
Yeah, I think so. What are your tips then, Alex?
Okay, if I were to sort of give advice about engaging in a CX program, if you like, and the CX program, I see that as encompassing both what I do and what you do, but I'll talk about the first part, which is actually gathering high quality insights. I think that my first tip would be to always ensure that insights include perspectives from employees, customers, and key stakeholders, not just the customer. I think we've mentioned that a few times, but it's really critical because you're basically missing a lot of perspectives and a lot of, as we said, probably free or already paid for insights. Why would you ignore them? So that'd be my first tip. My second tip would be to use structured research methods such as interviews, workshops, and behavioral data to go beyond assumptions. So again, we said that it's very easy to just make assumptions. I think I know this, or in my network, we're all saying that this is the in thing, but is that really what customers think? The key is that you want to get more nuance and context. So I would advise that, yes, it is easier to use surveys, etc., very powerfully to get lots of insights, or even just look at whatever business intelligence tool you have. But you want, I think, to underpin that with qualitative insights, actually talking to your customers, really talk to them, get their voice, hear the nuance, even hear maybe their frustration, etc. You can even use that to actually really hammer the point in with the rest of the team when you can actually hear their voice. Literally, it's that powerful. So bring different perspectives, different research methodologies are really critical. I would say that then it's also, I think this is probably my favorite actually, but it's create an insights hub where insights are logged, shared, and referenced by different teams. This is, for me, the easiest way for you to break down those silos. If you can put all the information in one place, you avoid this idea of having a big, massive PDF report that gets put on a shelf, or obviously a virtual shelf, and never used again. If you've got an insights hub where it's actually, that when you log in, there's going to be ongoing insights, the latest piece of research, everything is being brought together, being analyzed together, and insights are being generated from those different sources, it's going to become probably one of the most important tools that you have within an organization. So an insights hub is absolutely critical. My fourth tip would be actually we talked about this earlier, is to assign CX champions in each department to ensure insights don't stay siloed as well. Again, this is not about the insights hub. The insights hub is there, but if you're not feeding it properly, it's not going to work either. But if you've got someone within each department who can actually feed that, and you don't have to be a big organization to have that. It might just be 2 people or whatever, but as long as you've got someone who's actually representing an aspect of the business and bringing those insights to the rest of the organization, that's always great. And finally, I would say, or I'd recommend integrating CX insights into quarterly business reviews to ensure that leadership uses them for strategic planning. It's not just about tweaking a website or tweaking a sales pitch. It's actually, I think, mainly for the leadership team to know exactly what is the next strategic step by building and having an absolute clarity of knowledge of what your customers need, want, and what their pain points are. So that's from my perspective.
Right.
What would be, I suppose, what would be the key steps to implement? So I've been talking about all these CX insights, but how would you actually implement them?
Yeah, and I think the first one is aligning leadership once you've got these insights to what the outcomes are expected from them. So getting that compass synchronization that we talked about earlier really, really clear with the organization. The second one is prioritizing. And we've talked a lot about capacity in organizations, but really prioritizing what are the biggest themes to come out that can make the biggest impact for the organization, and making sure that organization is aligned. The third one is making sure there is a really solid action plan to deliver it, because otherwise focus gets diverted. It just naturally happens in an organization. So making sure that action plan is there, people are held to account on their actions, and there is a program to actually start leveraging that really powerful piece of work that has the potential to really change in the trajectory. And then finally, getting some quick wins, making sure that you can show the value quickly of what this work can do, because once people start to believe in it, it will become even more powerful as you go on to the more strategic elements, which might take longer to execute. But making sure that you've got those quick wins really does make a difference.
I think I want to emphasize that. I think that's really important. All this can actually seem quite overwhelming, and it's all about knowing and starting small. And even from the insights gathering perspective, even having 1 or 2 conversations a month with a few customers is better than doing nothing or trying to do something too big if you think it's not going to work or you're not going to get buy-in. And as you just said, then using those and having those first quick wins is going to make everyone go, wow, we're seeing change. And that is really powerful.
Yeah, very good.
Okay. Well, look, I think this is the end of this episode.
Very interesting discussion, and it shows the power of CX.
And I'm really pleased to sort of discuss what happens after also that insights gathering. I think that's really important. So thank you so much for sharing as well.
No, great. Thank you very much, Alex. Thank you.